The bright studio lights reflected off the polished floor, illuminating the stage where cameras rolled, and the live audience buzzed with anticipation. Everyone expected a lighthearted interview, but no one was prepared for what was about to happen. The TV host, known for his sharp tongue and cutting jokes, had already been making subtle digs at celebrities that season, but today he had set his sights on Muhammad Ali, the greatest boxer of all time. As Ali walked on stage, confident and calm, the host smirked. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have the legend himself, Muhammad Ali," he said, voice dripping with sarcasm. The audience clapped politely, but the host wasn't done. Leaning into the microphone, he added, "Though I have to wonder, all that talk about being the greatest, is it really deserved, or is it just a lot of hot air?" Laughter erupted from some corners of the studio. A few viewers in the audience chuckled nervously, unsure if this was a joke or crossing the line. But Ali remained perfectly still, his eyes steady, a small knowing smile playing on his lips. The room felt a strange tension. Even the crew behind the cameras seemed to hold their breath. The host pressed on. "I mean, you've thrown some punches in the ring, sure. But can you throw a good comeback here on live television? Or is it all just boxing bravado?" He laughed at his own joke, expecting Ali to stumble or respond defensively. But Ali didn't react immediately. He tilted his head slightly, scanning the audience, letting the words sink in. There was a stillness, almost like the calm before a storm. The audience's laughter faded, as they realized this wasn't going to be the usual back and forth. Every second of silence added weight to the moment, every eye in the studio fixed on him, waiting for a reaction. Then, without raising his voice or showing anger, Ali opened his mouth. What he said next wasn't just clever, it was unforgettable. It was the kind of response that didn't just shut down a mocker, it commanded respect. The host froze mid-smile, his smug expression faltering as Ali's calm confidence filled the room. People leaned forward in their seats. Cameras zoomed in. Even the studio lights seemed to dim in the weight of his words. By the time Ali finished, the audience sat in stunned silence. No laughter, no applause. Just a quiet realization they had witnessed something extraordinary. A lesson in humility's strength, and the kind of presence that only a true legend could command. Comment below, where are you watching from? Share if you've ever seen someone handle disrespect with such power. The studio was buzzing with excitement as the cameras rolled. Bright lights hung overhead, reflecting off the glossy floors, while crew members hustled quietly behind the scenes. The audience chatted nervously, unaware that they were about to witness a moment that would go down in television history. Today's guest was none other than Muhammad Ali, the man who had transcended boxing to become a global icon. Calm, confident, and unshakable, Ali carried himself with a presence that commanded attention the moment he stepped onto the stage. The host, known for his sharp wit and fearless mockery, adjusted his tie and leaned casually against the desk. He had prepared his jokes well in advance, rehearsed his lines, and believed he had the perfect material to belittle the legendary boxer. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, gesturing with exaggerated flair, "we have the one and only Muhammad Ali in the studio. The man who floats like a butterfly and stings like a bee, or so he claims." A ripple of polite laughter passed through the audience. Some clapped out of courtesy, others chuckled nervously, unsure how far the host would go. The host, noticing their reactions, grinned wider. He loved this. To him, getting a reaction out of someone like Ali was a game, a chance to prove he could outwit even the greatest. "Of course," the host continued, "we all know you've thrown some incredible punches in the ring, Mr. Ali. But tell me, outside the ring, can you throw a few witty comebacks here on live television, or is all that bravado only good for boxing arenas?" He leaned in, waiting for the audience to erupt with laughter. Ali didn't react, not immediately. He stood there calm and composed, eyes scanning the room as if assessing every angle, every reaction. He adjusted his posture slightly, letting a small, knowing smile play on his lips. The silence that followed was almost palpable, and for a moment, even the cameras seemed to pause. The audience shifted in their seats, some leaning forward, sensing that the exchange was no longer just about jokes. It was becoming a lesson in presence and respect. The host, growing more confident, decided to push further. "I mean, come on, Ali," he said mockingly. "You talk about being the greatest, but can you handle a little teasing? Or are all your big words just boxing bravado?" He chuckled at his own remark, expecting a reaction, maybe even a defensive outburst. But Ali didn't respond immediately. He let the words hang in the air, letting the tension build. The host's smirk faltered ever so slightly as he realized Ali wasn't going to play along. The audience, too, began to sense something different. Ali wasn't going to react like everyone else. There would be no angry outburst, no forced laughter, no giving in to ego. Ali finally spoke, his voice calm, measured, and deliberate. He didn't need to raise it to be heard. The room seemed to fall silent in anticipation. Every word carried weight, a precision honed from years of experience both in and out of the ring. The host, who had expected Ali to stumble or get flustered, suddenly found himself on the receiving end of a presence far stronger than any joke could match. The audience watched in awe as Ali's words cut through the tension like a perfectly timed punch. Cameras zoomed in to capture his expression, calm, confident, unshakable. Ali had a way of making everyone in the room feel the gravity of his presence without shouting, without theatrics. It wasn't anger they saw, it was quiet authority, the kind that commands respect naturally. In that moment, even the host realized that he had underestimated the man before him. This wasn't just a guest on a TV show. This was Muhammad Ali, the legend, the master of strategy both in the ring and in life. And tonight, he was about to teach a lesson that no one watching would ever forget. A comment below, where are you watching from? Have you ever seen someone handle disrespect with such quiet power? The tension in the studio was thick enough to cut with a knife. Every camera lens seemed to focus entirely on Muhammad Ali and the host. The audience, initially expecting a lighthearted interview, now sat frozen, their laughter fading into uneasy murmurs. Even the production crew behind the camera slowed down, sensing that something extraordinary was unfolding live. The host, who had prided himself on pushing celebrities to the edge, now realized that he might have bitten off more than he could chew. The host leaned back in his chair, his smirk still intact, though slightly strained. "Come on, Ali," he said, trying to regain control. "You talk about being the greatest. But can you handle a little teasing here on live television? Or are all your big words just boxing bravado?" He let out a nervous chuckle, expecting a defensive reply, a stumble, or at the very least, some flustered amusement from the audience. Ali didn't answer immediately. He stood tall, shoulders squared, eyes steady, scanning the room. There was a calm, almost imperceptible smile on his lips, the kind that only someone completely confident in themselves could wear. The silence stretched, making the host shift uncomfortably. His rehearsed lines, meant to provoke, seemed suddenly trivial against Ali's presence. The audience, sensing the shift, began to lean forward in their seats, some whispering to neighbors. "He's not reacting, what's he going to do?" The host, growing impatient, decided to escalate. "I mean, look, Ali," he said, voice a little sharper. "You float like a butterfly and sting like a bee in the ring shore. But here, in front of cameras and people who actually pay attention, can you really show us that greatness? Or is it all just smoke and mirrors?" A ripple of laughter followed, though smaller this time. The host's confidence returned briefly, thinking he had regained control. But Ali's expression didn't change. Instead, he took a measured step forward, letting the audience's attention lock onto him. There was a quiet authority in his stance, the kind that makes you stop mid-breath, the kind that fills a room without raising a voice. Then, in that calm, deliberate tone, Ali spoke. "You think words alone define greatness," he said, letting each syllable land. "But it's how you carry yourself when challenged, how you treat others when they test you, that truly shows who you are." The audience leaned in. The host blinked, caught off guard. Ali's gaze wasn't angry or hostile. It wasn't defensive. It was the calm of someone who knew exactly who he was and what he stood for. The host's smirk faltered. What do you mean?" he stammered, trying to regain his composure. Ali continued, his voice steady and measured. "You mock and belittle because it makes you feel bigger. But confidence isn't proven by putting others down. Strength isn't proven by humiliating someone else. Real greatness comes when you remain unshaken, when arrogance in others doesn't dictate your actions." Whispers spread through the audience. Some gasped, some shook their heads. Cameras panned over the live crowd, capturing every reaction, the stunned expressions, the silent awe, the realization that Ali was teaching a life lesson in front of millions. Even the crew behind the scenes exchanged glances, quietly acknowledging that they were witnessing more than an interview. They were witnessing a masterclass in dignity and control. The host, now visibly rattled, tried to regain his bravado. "Well, I was just trying to be funny." Ali's eyes narrowed slightly, not with anger, but with measured intensity. "Funny?" he asked calmly. "At whose expense?" Lauder gained by stepping on someone else's dignity is empty. Respect is not something you demand. It's something you earn, and it can be taken away in a second by your own arrogance. A hush fell over the studio. The audience could barely breathe. Ali's words had not only shut down the host, but had flipped the power dynamic entirely. The host, who had thought he controlled the room, now seemed small, insignificant, and exposed. Every joke he had prepared, every jab he had rehearsed, crumbled under the weight of Ali's composed authority. Ali paused for a moment, letting the silence speak for him. Then, with a faint smile, he added, "And sometimes, the people you try to humiliate turn out to be the ones you'll never forget. Remember that." The host's face paled, his forced confidence gone. The audience erupted in quiet murmurs of astonishment, some capturing the moment on their phones, realizing they had witnessed something rare, the graceful dismantling of arrogance by pure presence and intellect. Comment below. Have you ever seen someone handle disrespect with such calm power? Could you stay this composed if someone humiliated you in front of everyone? The moment Ali finished speaking, the studio felt like it had been struck by lightning. Every eye in the room was fixed on him, some wide with awe, others narrowing in disbelief. Silence blanketed the audience. Not the awkward silence of uncertainty, but the charged stillness of people who had just witnessed someone dismantle arrogance without raising a hand or losing a calm demeanor. The host, once smug and in control, now sat frozen behind his desk. His rehearsed jokes, his witty comebacks, all evaporated in the face of Ali's quiet, unwavering authority. He swallowed hard, trying to muster a word, a response, anything to regain his lost confidence. But Ali wasn't looking for a fight, he was teaching a lesson. And the lesson was far deeper than anything the host had prepared for. The audience, meanwhile, reacted in waves. Some whispered to each other. Did he just shut him down without even raising his voice? Others were recording on their phones, knowing they were witnessing something unforgettable. Cameras zoomed in, capturing every stunned expression, every slack-jawed reaction. Even the crew behind the cameras felt the weight of the moment, their hands paused, the click of buttons forgotten, as they realized history was unfolding before their eyes. An older audience member, a woman in the front row, muttered to her neighbor, "I've seen interviews before, but I've never seen anyone command respect like that, just with words and presence." Her neighbor nodded in agreement, eyes still locked on Ali. The energy in the room shifted from entertainment to reverence. The host attempted to laugh nervously, a hollow sound that didn't reach his eyes. "Well, I suppose that's one way to handle things," he stammered, hoping to salvage the situation, but Ali didn't respond immediately. He stood there, calm and composed, giving the audience time to fully absorb the weight of his words. The host's smirk had vanished completely, replaced by a fleeting look of shock and uncertainty. A few seconds passed, but in television, a few seconds can feel like an eternity. The audience leaned forward, collectively holding their breath. Ali finally spoke again, his voice steady, controlled, and measured. "You see, greatness is not measured by how loudly you can mock someone or belittle them in public. It's measured by how you carry yourself when faced with arrogance, when people underestimate you, or when they try to provoke you." The room remained silent, hanging on every word. Cameras caught the subtle shift in body language, some people straightening in their seats, some leaning in closer, some covering their mouths in disbelief. Ali's words weren't just a comeback, they were a masterclass in handling disrespect with dignity. Meanwhile, the host fumbled with his notes, desperately searching for a way to regain control. But Ali had already claimed the room. Even without raising his voice or gesturing dramatically, he had completely flipped the power dynamic. The audience wasn't just watching a TV interview anymore. They were watching a man remind the world of what true strength looks like. A young man in the back row whispered to his friend, "I can't believe how calm he is. If that were me, I'd have shouted or stormed off by now." His friend nodded, eyes wide. "That's the thing about legends," he said. "They don't need to fight with words or fists. Their presence alone is enough." Ali paused again, letting the impact of his presence and words sink in. He looked directly at the host, not with anger, but with measured authority. The host's attempts to smile were half-hearted, his confidence visibly shaken. He realized that no joke, no preparation, no mocking line could outshine the quiet power Ali exuded. Finally, Ali broke the silence with a faint, knowing smile. It wasn't triumphant, it wasn't arrogant. It was the smile of someone who had handled disrespect the way only a true master could, calmly, gracefully, and with unwavering dignity. The audience erupted, not with laughter, but with applause, murmurs of awe, and cheers. Phones were raised everywhere, recording the unforgettable moment. Even the crew, who had seen thousands of interviews, exchanged glances of disbelief. By the time Ali left the stage, the energy in the studio had shifted completely. The host slouched, humbled, his bravado gone. The audience left buzzing, sharing what they had just witnessed, knowing they had seen more than an interview. They had witnessed a lesson in humility, power, and respect that would stay with them forever. Comment below. Have you ever seen someone command respect without raising their voice? Could you stay calm under that kind of pressure? The studio was still buzzing with tension after Muhammad Ali's calm, powerful response to the host's mockery. The audience sat in stunned silence, some clapping quietly, others whispering to each other about what they had just witnessed. Cameras captured every detail: Ali's unshakable composure, the host's faltering confidence, and the shocked expressions of the audience. It was clear that this was no ordinary interview. Something monumental had just occurred. The host, still trying to regain control, shuffled his papers nervously. "Well, I suppose that's one way to handle things," he muttered. His voice trembled slightly, betraying the nerves he tried to hide. He had expected Ali to stumble, to get flustered, maybe even to fire back with sharp words. But instead, Ali had done something far more powerful. He had dismantled the host's arrogance without ever raising his voice. Just as the host attempted a weak smile, Ali leaned slightly forward, his eyes calm but piercing. "You've learned something tonight," he said softly, almost like a whisper that carried louder than any shout. "Respect is earned, not demanded. Confidence is proven through actions, not mockery. And true greatness is recognized by those who can remain unshaken when others try to provoke them." The host's smirk completely disappeared. The audience, sensing the weight of Ali's words, leaned in. The realization began to settle over the room like a slow, dawning truth. Ali wasn't just defending himself, he was teaching a lesson that would outlive the show, the host, and even the cameras. The host realized, painfully, that he had underestimated the man standing before him. Then, without warning, Ali paused and let the silence stretch. The audience shifted, unsure if he was done or if there was more to come. And there was. Ali reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. The cameras zoomed in automatically, sensing the action. The audience murmured, curiosity rising. "I came here tonight expecting an interview," Ali said, his voice calm and steady. "But sometimes, the people who think they are in control of a situation need to be reminded who truly holds the power." He handed the paper directly to the host. The host opened it cautiously, almost as if expecting a trap. On the paper was a contract, a legal document confirming Ali's role, not just as a guest but as a consultant for the network, giving him a direct say in content decisions and the way guests were treated. His eyebrows shot up, and a nervous laugh escaped his lips. "Wait, this can't be real," he stammered. Ali smiled faintly. "It's real," he said. "It ensures that respect isn't optional anymore for you, for your staff, or for any future guest who walks into this studio." The audience erupted in applause, some whistling, others recording the moment on their phones. Even crew members behind the cameras were cheering quietly, amazed at the unexpected twist. The host's face went pale, a mix of shock and realization crossing his features. He had mocked the greatest of all time, only to find that not only had he been humbled, but the entire room now recognized Ali as the one in charge. Ali continued, his voice calm but firm. "Tonight, a lesson was given not in anger but in presence. Not through shouting but through dignity. Not by defeating someone in words, but by showing what true strength looks like." The host, finally finding his voice, tried to speak. "I never expected." But Ali cut him off gently, shaking his head. "No excuses. The moment has passed. Let it be remembered for what it is, a reminder that arrogance can crumble in silence, and respect can be earned in a glance." The studio felt transformed. The audience, once there for entertainment, now understood the gravity of what had happened. Cameras captured reactions ranging from awe to disbelief, the kind of raw, genuine human emotion that no scripted moment could replicate. Even social media, already buzzing, would later explode with clips of Ali's composed dominance, his calm dismantling of the host's mockery, and the reveal of his authority in the studio. As Ali stood to leave, the host sat slouched, humbled, his confidence shattered, but his respect for the man in front of him undeniable. The audience rose in a standing ovation, cheering, clapping, and waving phones in celebration of the legend, who had just redefined what it means to command respect. Comment below. Would you have stayed calm like Ali? Could you handle someone mocking you in front of thousands without losing control? Type res PT if you believe humility and dignity are true power. The studio remained charged with energy long after Muhammad Ali's words and actions had silenced the host. Cameras were still rolling, capturing the stunned faces of the audience, crew, and host alike. It was as if time itself had slowed. Everyone was processing what had just happened. Ali, however, remained calm and collected, a quiet storm of authority and dignity. His presence alone seemed to reshape the atmosphere, turning tension into a profound lesson in respect and humility. The host, slouched behind his desk, finally looked up. His eyes, once brimming with smug confidence, were now wide with realization. Every joke he had prepared, every insult he had intended to land, had been dismantled, not with anger, not with sarcasm, but with calm composure. He swallowed hard, his throat dry. For the first time on live television, he felt small. Ali, noticing the host's struggle, didn't press further. He didn't need to. The lesson had already been delivered. Instead, he turned his attention to the rest of the studio, the audience, the crew, and a few staff members who had quietly observed from behind the cameras. Remember this, Ali said, his voice measured and unwavering. True strength isn't proven by mocking others. True power isn't shown by putting people down. It's shown in how you carry yourself when others try to challenge or belittle you. A murmur of agreement spread through the crowd. People who had laughed earlier now nodded slowly, understanding what they had witnessed. Ali wasn't just a guest on a talk show. He was a living example of composure under pressure, a masterclass in dignity. The host finally found his voice, trembling slightly. I never. His words faltered. Ali shook his head gently, cutting him off without malice. No excuses, he said calmly. The moment has passed. Learn from it, and remember, respect is never optional. It's earned and it can be lost in an instant. Behind the cameras, the crew exchanged glances. Some whispered, I've never seen anything like this. Others recorded quickly, knowing they were capturing something historic. The energy in the studio had shifted completely. What had begun as a simple interview had transformed into a lesson that would echo far beyond these walls. Ali's gaze then shifted to a young production assistant sitting quietly at the side, who had nervously watched the host's antics unfold. You did well, Ali said softly. Sometimes staying calm and respectful. When others try to provoke you is the hardest thing to do, but it's also the most powerful. The young assistant's eyes widened in disbelief, his respect for Ali instantly cemented. Turning back to the audience, Ali continued, Life will always throw people at you who underestimate you, mock you, or try to bring you down. How you respond defines you more than their words ever will. Stay composed, stay humble, and always let your actions speak louder than their insults. By now the host was visibly humbled. His bravado had completely disappeared, replaced by a mixture of awe and self-reflection. He realized that Ali had not only outshone him, but had also given everyone in that studio a lesson in what it means to be truly great. The audience, sensing the conclusion of this powerful moment, began to rise, offering a standing ovation that shook the studio walls. Phones were raised, clips recorded, and cheers erupted, celebrating not just Ali, but the dignity he had shown in the face of mockery. Ali nodded quietly, accepting the applause without fanfare. He knew the lesson had been delivered. The energy in the room had shifted, and respect had been restored, not through confrontation, but through composure, confidence, and unwavering self-assurance. Finally, Ali turned toward the exit, his movements calm and deliberate. Cameras followed, capturing every step of the legend who had just transformed a simple TV interview into a timeless lesson. The audience continued to cheer, some standing, some wiping tears, all fully aware they had witnessed greatness in its purest form. As the studio doors closed behind him, Ali left more than just applause in his wake. He left a lasting impression, a reminder that true power is silent, that true respect is earned, and that humility under pressure is the ultimate strength. A comment below. Could you stay this composed if someone humiliated you? Type res PT if you believe humility is the real strength. Where are you watching from? Share your story of staying calm under pressure. The studio was quiet now, the camera still rolling, but the tension that had gripped the room moments earlier had transformed into something else entirely: awe, reflection, and respect. Muhammad Ali had walked out, calm and composed, leaving behind an audience, crew, and even the host who had mocked him stunned, humbled, and forever changed. The lesson was clear: respect and dignity were not given, They were earned through action, presence, and character. The host, slouched in his chair, finally let out a long, shaky breath. For the first time in his career, he felt small. He realized that his arrogance, his jokes meant to belittle someone, had backfired completely. Ali hadn't just defended himself. He had taught a lesson that would stay with everyone in that studio and millions watching at home. The host's nervous smile had vanished, replaced by thoughtful silence. Even his rehearsed lines and witty comebacks seemed meaningless now. The audience, meanwhile, sat in stunned awe. Some whispered to neighbors, "Did you see how calm he was?" Others recorded every moment on their phones, knowing they had captured history. Phones buzzed across social media platforms instantly. Clips of Ali's measured, commanding response were being shared worldwide. The quiet, almost invisible power of humility and dignity had struck a chord. People weren't just entertained, they were inspired. Ali's lesson went beyond the studio lights and live cameras. It wasn't about fame or winning an argument. It was about integrity, character, and composure in the face of disrespect. The room had witnessed a masterclass in human behavior when provoked. True strength isn't shown by retaliation or anger. It's shown by calm confidence and letting your actions speak louder than words. Even the crew felt the impact. Camera operators, producers, and assistants who had handled thousands of interviews were exchanging glances of disbelief. "I've never seen anyone handle a situation like that," whispered one young assistant. "It's like he didn't just respond, he rewrote the rules." And in a way, he had. Ali had redefined what it meant to confront arrogance with dignity. Muhammad Ali's exit from the studio was understated, quiet, and deliberate. He didn't need fanfare or applause, yet the entire room continued clapping, standing, some even wiping tears from their eyes. The respect he commanded was not demanded. It had been earned effortlessly through his presence, his words, and his unwavering composure. And that is the moral. Respect is not something you show only to those in power or to those who can reward you. It is something you show to everyone, especially when you think no one is watching. Because one day, the person you underestimate or mock might be the one who shapes your world, or the one whose respect will matter more than anyone else's. Ali had reminded the host, the audience, and the world that night that true power is silent, and true greatness doesn't need to shout. It shows itself in action, in patience, in humility, and in the ability to remain composed when others try to provoke you. The strongest people are often the ones who respond not with anger, but with quiet authority and wisdom. Now it's your turn. Type RESPT in the comments if you believe humility and dignity are real strength. Share where you're watching from. Every kind soul who practices respect deserves recognition. And remember, moments like this don't just happen in the ring or on a TV set. They happen in everyday life. Every choice to stay calm, to respond with integrity, and to treat others with respect builds your true character. As the screen fades to black, remember this: anyone can make noise, anyone can mock, anyone can belittle. But it takes courage, strength, and confidence to remain silent, to act with dignity, and to command respect without uttering a single raised voice. Muhammad Ali showed the world that night that humility isn't weakness, it is the ultimate power. And that lesson will echo long after the cameras stop rolling, long after the applause fades, and long after the TV show ends.